stand up for just a second and let's fulfill that one human need and shake somebody's hand, pat somebody on the back, give somebody a hug if it's legal. It's good. Did anybody, was anybody blessed by the last 30 minutes? Could we give him a big hand? He did a good job. What if we put him on a circuit like they used to, the preachers on the mules? And, you don't have to ride a mule, but we want you to come. And if you want a mule, we can arrange. Well, okay, so we can let him come in his car. But what if we did a leadership meeting once a quarter and maybe had him dig into our brains and our hearts a little bit? We come to church and we put on our plastic people under plastic steeples, and we're hiding our pain. And when you hide your pain, it becomes impossible for you to minister or me to minister. That's what the altar's for. The first instrument in the tabernacle, you couldn't go into the beautiful part until you passed the bloody part. And you had to go to the altar first. And so before we can go into the beauty of leadership and church growth and ministry, we got to go to the bloody part, and the honest part. And all of us, and it starts with me, struggle so much with that. What's the biggest problem in my life? The biggest problem in my life is not you, it is me. My hurts. And so we got to learn. And I don't know any other way to teach us. There's a lot of scripture, but we need someone that God's gifted that can relate scripture with our human frailties. We're humans. We're messed up by DNA. And so I just think it's such a good thing. And I want to, you be sure, because there's no question, we're going to protect this environment. Can we just say that if anything that's said in here for the next few minutes, it stays in here? Because somebody's got a hurt question they want to ask. Something happened to you when you was a little girl, a little boy, you'd like to ask. And it may not be something you can possibly ask in this meeting, but maybe you can catch him when he's late. But if you're brave enough, we're going to protect this environment. Because we want to grow together. And maybe me understanding your hurt will help us bind together and be. If one could set a flight 1,000 and two 10,000, what could we do together if we flushed out the hurt and the pain and the distrust and the anger and the resentment? The jealousies and all those things he talked about. It so overwhelming. No, he could have stopped and talked for an hour on any one of those things, and it would have been a blessing. I want to bring a man that's led men in battle. He wears a band. He won't talk about it. So he's got a silver band around his wrist, and engraved on that band are the men that died in battle that he lost. The perspective that you and I have we've been cradled in this thing we call America. By men like that. We have no concept of where he's been and what he's been through. And we've been so I think we need a little reality check here. And I know no greater person to do that than Kendall and our General Penn, excuse me. And let's give him a hand as he comes and talks to us for a few minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to come out tonight, buddy, and y'all please sit down. Okay, can you hear me now? All right. Yeah, as Buddy mentioned, we've known each other since first grade, and I'll never forget one of my earliest memories of Buddy is that this was back in about 71 or 72 when we first showed up at Miss Myrtle's first grade class. And back in the 70s, for those of you that can remember that far back, it was hairstyles were kind of in vogue there. They were a little bit longer than what they are now, and it was uncommon to have folks with hair down over their with guys to have hair down over their ears. And Buddy and I, our parents were a little bit more conservative, so we were pointed out early on as having conservative style, the two guys with the conservative style haircuts in the class. So, And we've known each other for forever and ever. And the only things I could ever say bad about Buddy is he never lets me win when we go fishing. We were over in town here the other day having lunch, and he asked me to come out and talk about leadership. And you would kind of think that somebody that spent 32 years in the Army, it's kind of intuitive that they ought to be able to come up and just talk about leadership off the drop of a hat, at the drop of a hat. And so I'm not necessarily a very eloquent person, and so I thought, before I came in, I should probably sit down and crack open some books and see what's out there on leadership that I could put together in some kind of cohesive talk. And whether you would believe it or not, there's just reams and reams of stuff about leadership, none of which necessarily meshes up very well together. And if you've ever taken any courses in college in business management, every one of them have at least a small module somewhere in that course on leadership, and none of them say the same things. So as I was thinking about it, what I was going to say, I just kind of thought, well, there's probably some standard truths that apply across, regardless of what kind of organization you're in, or where you've served or what you've done. And so I thought I'd just kind of throw some thoughts out here in no certain order to kind of give you some ideas for what maybe leadership is. And I'm going to start off with what the Army lays out as their book definition of leadership. It's influencing people by providing purpose, direction, and motivation while operating to accomplish the mission and improving the organization. Now, caught up in that is the idea that somewhere out there there's a leader, and somewhere underneath that leader is a follower. And it's almost in a hierarchical organization, it's a requirement. If you're going to be a leader, there's got to be somebody out there for you to tell what to do. But when it really gets right down to it, that's what leadership is. It's getting somebody to do what it is you need them to do. So, when you think about it, there's, from a standpoint of a soldier, it's different leadership than leadership here in a church. Leadership kind of changes dependent upon where you sit. For a young soldier, leadership is the sergeant telling him what to do and managing every aspect of his day-to-day activities. But if you go up in the organization and you get up to where you have colonels and generals, leadership is going out and figuring out what has to be done and making sure that everybody knows. It's going out and getting the resources to do that. It's putting together a plan that gets everybody moving in a cohesive direction. Same thing here in the church. If you think about leadership from the pastor's perspective, it's making sure that we've got programs in place so that the maximum number of people are able to participate in worship in ways that hold their interest. In my case, I like to sit out here and listen to the pastor preach. But if you were to ask my daughter, her favorite thing about the service is the song service. She likes to sing. So having services or having programs that provide academic instruction, having programs that provide music, having programs that reach out into the communities, all of those are different aspects of leadership here in the church. But on the same note, there's leadership down at the very lower levels here. And I never talked to the pastor about this, but here back about, well, let me back up just a little bit. I've been retired about a year and a half. And when I retired, one of the things I've always wanted to do is go out to the western United States and hike on the Pacific Crest Trail. It's a long trail that runs all the way from Southern California all the way up into Canada. Now, I didn't do all of that, but I spent about a month out there hiking the first year that I was retired. And I met a guy named John, and we became friends. We were both old dudes, and we were hiking about the same pace and ended up in the same campgrounds every day. And through Facebook, we've been able to become friends and to stay in contact. Well, John came to Arkansas this past summer to do some hiking out here with me. And so we had a Sunday with where we were both here and available, and so I loaded him up and brought him to church here. Now, John he was raised up in in a Catholic school, and he never really had any formal Catholic instruction, but he has mentioned on several times that the school just soured him on the whole thought of religion. And so I brought him in here, and Brother Jones was singing, and we spent the rest of the day talking about how great Brother Jones' song service was, and it gave me several opportunities to witness to him. But above and beyond that, a number of you, I can count at least a half a dozen people here right now that came up during the course of our time here who shook John's hand and told him how thankful they were that he was a part of the service today. That is leadership. You know, you may not have directive authority over the person, but your willingness to step up there and put yourself out there and say thanks for showing up and being friendly influences somebody. And it makes, and so he walked away from here saying that was the friendliest church service I've ever been in. Your willingness to reach out and touch him made it possible for me to witness to him. He was able to go, you know, when I stand before God at the end of time and I'm being judged on my service here on this earth, John's blood, I think, will not be on my hands due to the work that all of you here that were able to step up and perform on behalf of the church. Another thing about leaders, you know, regardless of where you're at, even though you may be a leader, there's always somebody else in charge over you. And so, you know, in the Army, you know, privates have sergeants, sergeants have lieutenants, and so on up the line until you get all the way up to the generals. But even the generals have the secretaries of the service branch, and the secretaries of the services have the Secretary of Defense, who has the president, until you finally get to the point where you start to reach into the, you know, the Constitution and the people at large who oversee our democracy. Well, it's the same here in church. You know, we all work for somebody, and while the pastor provides the nominal direction and overhead for the direction that we're going, you know, I don't think there's any doubt here who we all work for in the confines of the church. It's the God that put us here on this earth. And there's one other thing about leaders, you know, that I'd like to bring up before I close up here tonight. You know, they're always fewer in number than the led. You know, Buddy mentioned that tonight we had the movers and shakers in the church, the people who make things happen. Now, on any given Sunday when I'm in here, there's probably a couple of hundred people here. And I think if we counted here tonight, we'd see a significant number less than that. It goes to show the importance of the work that you all do to make this organization, this church, successful. And it's the sacrifice that you provide, because let's all face it. You know, if you're a Sunday school teacher, you don't just show up on Sunday morning and say, okay, what are we going to study about today? You have to be ready. You have to be prepared. It all takes time out of your schedule. It takes time away from your family. It takes a little bit of sacrifice. If you're going to be the pastor, the same thing. You know, you can't just show up on Sundays. Your pastor responsibilities take place throughout the week. So, just in quick closing, I just want to say thank you very much for what you all do for the church here, and more to the point, what you do for the community and what you do for those souls out there that need to hear the message that gets preached here from this pulpit every Sunday. So thank you again for the opportunity to come out.